What do you think you learned most from your biggest failure?
There's two that come to mind. The first is when I was at my first startup, we shared a building with a company that was, they were like an Amazon e-commerce agency, so they help people prop up Amazon stores. And while we were there, I was like, all right, I'm gonna build a business. And I had this idea. I was like, let's do fanny packs.
Okay.
I was like, I don't even remember how I landed on the idea. I think I looked like, my market research was I went to Google Trends and I looked up fanny packs and I was like, it looks like it was down last year, but then it was up and now it's down, so it's got to go up again. It's like, all right, there's my idea. So I got on Alibaba. I worked with like the CEO of the Amazon agency and he was like, here's what you do. You do this, 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 and this. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Spent $5,000 on fanny packs, got everything delivered. Everything got stuck in the port, and then next thing I knew, life got busy. Startup ran out of money. I was no longer working there by the time that I was like established and we got set back up. My inventory finally got released from the port. It was like 3 months late, and then I was just like, I don't have the energy for this because I'm in a new job and I've got new things going on. So I'm just gonna put these to the side for just a little bit. Those fanny packs, I got them, I took delivery of them in August of 2021. They have moved with us from Orem, Utah to American Fork, Utah, from American Fork, Utah to Indianapolis, Indiana, from Indianapolis, Indiana back to American Fork. When I was in Indiana, I moved them from like 3 different locations. So the Great Value moving boxes from Walmart, really high quality, by the way, because they've held up over the years. But I look back at that and I would chalk that up as like one of my personal venture biggest failures, because I didn't technically like get going. But I learned so much from that experience of that being like my first business. And that was when I realized, honestly, like so many people they glamorize the idea of running a business, of like, oh, I'm gonna have my product and I'm gonna come up with this idea. And then all of a sudden you have to think about like, oh, it's gonna cost $5,000 a month to have a warehouse and pay for rent in like a good spot. You're gonna have to pay employees at least $15 an hour to pack orders if you have an e-commerce business at the bare minimum, not to mention having to pay salaries for other employees that are way more high value. Like all of a sudden the costs get really high and you don't think about having to bear the burden of all of those things when you get high on the idea of I'm gonna go launch a business. And so from that, I realized what I really needed was to go learn from other people that had done it successfully, so that eventually when I came up with my idea or what I wanted to do, I'd have all that experience to back me up so that I didn't feel like I was going in blind, so that I could avoid making the same mistakes that other people had made and they could teach me those while I was also helping them. And so I'd say that was like a big failure per se. Thankfully, and I'll kind of like knock on wood, like I haven't had any major life-altering or life-ending failures. I'd say I'm very high risk, but I'm very calculated high risk. And so I know like the right criteria of like what I can manage. Before, when it was just me and my wife and our costs were like next to nothing on a month-to-month basis, like I felt way more comfortable taking way bigger risks and different things. But we've got a family now, we've got a house, like I got to balance that out so that my wife also feels comfortable with anything we do. But yeah, I mean, I think there's little failures that happen on a day-to-day basis that I still learn from, right? Like, oh, I should have messaged that text or that email better because the prospect that I'm working with would have responded a little bit better than that. And then I'd say just like an overarching, and this is actually a piece of advice that I got from a friend, kind of a mutual friend that we know, Tim Holiday with Space Station. Best piece of advice that I've ever gotten, specifically on like the topic of business deals. He said the number one thing that kills deals is time. So when time gets in the way, like it's not that people have concerns or anything, like the sooner you address concerns for people, the sooner you overcome objections or problems that people are facing, like the number one thing that kills deals is time. And so I've failed a lot in that aspect where I've let time get in the way of things that could have been. But I also have the perspective of like, if things are gonna work out, they're gonna work out. So I don't put too much pressure on them.